In the myth, Medusa has become a type of monster called a Gorgon, a name that comes from the ancient Greek word for terrible.
The Gorgon is this horrible monster. It's got scaly skin, huge staring eyes, and it can turn you to stone by looking at you.
The earliest traditions that we have of Gorgons mention Medusa. Medusa becomes first a human being who's then transformed into one of these nasty beasts.
In Greek myth, Gorgons represent the physical embodiment of death. In fact, death is what inspired them.
The broad, wide-open eyes, the marks on the face, the bloated face itself, the pulled-back skin showing the teeth and the tongue protruding was inspired by the sight of a dead body.
In the days after dying, the skin of a human corpse begins to shrink around the various parts of the body. The face becomes grotesquely bloated. The eyes expand out of their sockets, and the tongue swells, pushing itself out of the mouth. Gradually, the corpse morphs from man to monster.
On photographs of dead bodies, you can see all of these changes that are characteristic of the Gorgon taking place. This is one of the things that people today aren't so familiar with. We get separated from death very early. We have specialists who take care of dead bodies. But the truth is that in ancient times, you wouldn't be insulated from this. People would see this sort of thing.
Death was everywhere in the ancient world. In fact, many other historical monsters are modeled on corpses.
In the middle of the Aztec calendar, you find exactly the same features. You've got exactly the same oversized eyes, you've got the broad nose, you've got the rictus grin, you have the protruding tongue. You find it in Bes in Egypt. In India, you find many of the same features on Rahu, the demon responsible for the eclipse. In Southeast Asia, Rangda, the demon that kidnaps children, also has huge pop eyes and a very, very long tongue scrolling out of her mouth.
The prominence of this Gorgon symbol in many different spots in the ancient world gives us a real sense of just how widespread these myths were.
In the story, Medusa is now a Gorgon, the mythical face of death. But her physical transformation is only the beginning of her punishment. Her hideous looks will make her an outcast, but her petrifying power will make her a target. Because the warrior who beheads Medusa will possess the ultimate battlefield advantage. Her severed head will still turn men to stone. Men from all over the Mediterranean set out to slay Medusa and claim that power for themselves. One of them has more than glory at stake. His name is Perseus. And his hunt for Medusa's head is one of mythology's greatest adventures. The story of Perseus begins in Argos, a real region of southern Greece.
In antiquity, a lot of myths were actually situated in specific locations. Now, this was important for the people who lived in those places. They could actually claim connection to one of these divine heroes.
In the myth, Argos is ruled by a tyrant named Acrisius. The king has a problem. He has no male heir.
The Greek world tried to retain property in families. And the way you retain it in families is you leave it to the firstborn son or the eldest male heir.
Acrisius's only child is a daughter, Danae. She has no children of her own. So the king consults a prophetess to ask if she will ever bear him a grandson.
Acrisius is told in prophecy that if his daughter ever had a child, that child would rise up and kill him.
When he finds out that the son of his daughter is in fact going to kill him, he sort of freaks out and decides that he needs to prevent her from ever having a child to begin with.
This fear of generational shift, this fear of losing your power to the next generation, was real. If you had a kid and you had something worth taking, at some point you needed to keep an eye on the kid.
Overcome by terror, the king hatches a plan to save his own skin.
Chrysis had his daughter Danae walled up inside of a tower where no one could see her. It was a pretty miserable existence.
Danae is trapped with no fresh air and barely any food. It is the king's way of killing her without getting blood on his hands.
The king kept waiting for news that his daughter had died and was very surprised that he never received news that she had died of starvation or thirst.
After a while, they began to see lights on and hear noise and sound coming from the tower, and so Chrysis went to see what his daughter was up to.
The king enters his daughter's chamber and discovers to his horror that Danae is not only still alive, she's a mother to a son, Perseus. Acrisius is stunned that someone accessed the secure tower and impregnated his daughter. But the baby's father isn't a mortal man. He is king of the Greek gods, mythology's most prolific womanizer, Zeus.
Zeus, who seduced so many women in so many myths, sees Danae through the grating and falls in love with her. And so he comes down to her in about the only shape that could come through the bars, which is a shower of gold.
He took the form of a cascade of gold and poured himself into the room and then was able to make love to her in that way.
Zeus's shower of gold may have been inspired by a real natural phenomenon, one named after Perseus.
Probably the most impressive and the most visible meteorite shower in the sky is the Perseid meteorite shower. Certainly it looks like a shower of gold coming down if you've ever stopped and watched it in August. You can see the individual streaks with a yellowish color to them. In mythologies around the world, women can be impregnated by various natural forces. And it's not just the shower of gold that we have in the legend of Perseus. We have women and animals sometimes being impregnated by the wind, or in various mythologies, women become pregnant by the sun.
Perseus is born both divine and mortal, a type of hero known as a demigod.
So this demigod idea means that this person has some features that are very godly, some divine powers, but at the same time he is mortal, he can die. I suspect that the Greeks invented this idea of a demigod because they wanted to reach the gods as much as possible, to create images of themselves that are closer and closer to the gods.
To fulfill his destiny as a demigod, Perseus must first survive his grandfather's wrath. King Acrisius fears the boy will fulfill the prophecy he dreads and grow up to kill him. His first impulse is to murder both mother and child, but he fears Zeus's revenge. So he devises a plan to let nature do the killing for him.
Acrisius decided to put both the mother and the child into a boat-like construction and throw them into the sea.
Danae and Perseus have been left for dead, with no food, no direction, and no protection from the dangers of the sea. Meanwhile, on a dismal island beyond the waves, Medusa is adding statues to her garden of death. Warriors turn to stone trying to capture her head. She possesses a power every conqueror desires, even real conquerors, like Alexander the Great. Medusa's power to turn men to stone may have spawned the famous phrase, "looks that kill." But the ancient Greeks believed her power could be used for good as well as evil. In their language, the name Medusa actually had a positive connotation. It meant guardian. Her image was often used to ward off danger. She even appeared on the armor of some of the world's most feared warriors. Evidence of this can be found in one of the time capsules of the ancient world, Pompeii.
When they were excavating the city in the 1830s, archaeologists found a very large mosaic which depicts a battle between Alexander the Great and the Persian king Darius. And on Alexander's breastplate is an image of Medusa.
The battlefield wasn't the only place where Medusa's powers were sought. She was also used to scare children.
The idea was that you would put the symbol on the outside of your stove, and this would prevent children from opening up the oven door.
Now, the Medusa was something that Greek parents used to use in order to scare the kids in order to eat their food. Say, eat your food or I'll ask the Medusa to get you. So it was something that was very horrendous, very horrible, very mesmerizing, very frightening.